Good evening and a very warm welcome to your English news package with radio and television Tonga for the hour. Making headlines, new Supreme Court of Tonga Judge Mrs. Tongatapu Casey was sworn in as a new Supreme Court judge by the Honourable Prime Minister Wakawa this morning. 2 police officers are suspended on Wednesday from police duty on serious breaches of discipline charges, and the 2022 Chiefs of Defence 24th Conference completed as Chief of Defence Staff Brigadier Lord Philakepa participated and represented Tonga. Now with the stories in details. The Supreme Court of Tonga Judge Mrs. Tongatapu Casey was sworn in as the new Supreme Court Judge by the Honourable Prime Minister Wakawa this morning. Accompanied by the Lord Chief Justice Michael Whitten QC and her husband Mr. Claude Dubois, Honourable Justice Dubois took her oath in front of the Honourable Prime Minister Wakawa and Cabinet Ministers at the Cabinet Room. Honourable Justice Dubois' appointment was approved by His Majesty in Council after being recommended by the Judicial Appointments and Discipline Panel. She is a well-respected lawyer and has served Tonga in various positions over the years. Honourable Justice Dubois joins the Lord Chief Justice Whitten and Honourable Mr. Justice Cooper at the Supreme Court. Reporting for Radio and Television Tonga News, I'm Alice Dubois. From court, the Court of Appeal will hear the final statements of a few people's representatives that were found guilty of bribery in last year's elections and had their results deemed void.
The former People's Representative of Tongatapu, Semisi Sika, presented his plea to court yesterday. This was his plea in regards to accusing the current Tongatapu MP, Dr. Uhilamuelangi Fasi, of bribery in the Supreme Court earlier this year. The Supreme Court dismissed the case as they found no sufficient evidence against Dr. Fasi. The Tongatapu 4 People's Representative, Tafu Moyaki, also submitted his plea after being found guilty of bribery in last year's election. He was taken to court by a fellow candidate and former People's Representative Mateni Tapueluelu. Moyaki's plea was submitted by his lawyer Tom Weston, a former Supreme Judge in the Solomon Islands. Meanwhile, Tapueluelu's lawyer is Dr. Rodney Harrison. Yesterday, Tongatapu 6 People's Representative and Deputy Prime Minister Boasi Matailete's lawyer Sosifatu Tafaiva submitted his plea to court. Internal Affairs Minister and Tongatapu 7 People's Representative Sione Sengsta Saulala also submitted his plea by his lawyer Clive Edwards, while Biveni Piukala represented himself. Yesterday's remaining appellant was Dr. Tuionetoa, who completed his submission this afternoon in regards to his trial with the former town officer of Talasiu, Gelakolio Taniela Kiu, and his fellow candidate, Kapelieli Lanumata. However, it is understood that one of Tongatapu 5 candidate Akanete Lauti hasn't filed an appeal. The former People's Representative of Tongatapu 1, Siausi Pohiva, made his appeal through a written submission. The final judgment of these appeals will be released later. Vaifanatu Paula for Radio and Television Tonga News.
Police Commissioner Shane McLennan confirmed that 2 police officers were suspended on Wednesday from police duty on serious breaches of discipline charges due to a police inquest has concluded the cause of death of a 22-year-old male found dead in the prison cell at Moa Police Station was suicide.
The police inquest has concluded that the cause of death of a 22-year-old male found dead in the prison cell at Moa Police Station was suicide. The inquest was completed yesterday and his body released to his family. The deceased has been named by authorities as Veleti Manutahi Powono from La Paha. The Police Commissioner Shane McLennan confirmed that 2 police officers were suspended on Wednesday from police duty on serious breaches of discipline charges. This was later identified by the ongoing investigations into this matter. Other remedial actions have been made as a result of inspections conducted across the country, with police cells on Tongatapu, except for those at the Central Police Station in Nuku'alofa, are now closed until further notice. Tonga Police senior executives are also ensuring strong compliance with custody management processes, particularly at this time on the outer islands. Not only that, but work structures and practices are being amended to reinforce safety for both staff and custodians and also review of the custody management policy completes this week. In addition, a training schedule on relevant legislation, policy and human rights issues is set to run at each police station next week. Paula for Radio and Television Tonga News.
Chief of Defence Staff Brigadier Latu participated in the 2022 Chiefs of Defence 24th Annual Conference together with Indo-Pacific and Europe's Chiefs of Defence that was held in Sydney, Australia, which started on Monday the 25th of this month and was completed on Wednesday the 27th. The conference was co-hosted by the Australian Defence Force and US Indo-Pacific Command, as Australia was represented by Chief of the Defence Force, General Angus Campbell, and Commander US Indo-Pacific Command, Admiral John C. Aquilino. Bringing together senior military leaders from 27 countries, the conference promoted rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific. Discussions centered on the security implications of climate change, advanced technologies, and the conflicts in Ukraine and Indo-Pacific. According to a report from the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command website, the Chief of Defence Staff of His Majesty's Armed Forces, Brigadier Latu says that he is encouraged by the focus this year on climate change, an issue that threatens the livelihoods, security and well-being of the peoples of the Pacific. He adds that Tonga is committed to working with our partners and the Pacific family to address impacts of climate change and to ensure we come to each other's assistance in times of need. Reporting for Radio and Television Tonga News, I'm Ali Situpo. Tonga is participating in the International Seabed Authority meetings under the second part of the 27th session of the authority in Kingston, Jamaica. The council meeting started last Monday and will be completed today. Tonga's government geologist Daniela Gula is representing Tonga in this special meeting. The main item on the agenda of the council is to draft regulations on exploitation of mineral resources in the area. Meetings also saw discussions on regulations related to the protection and preservation of the marine environment, inspection, compliance and enforcement, and institutional matters. And the government's last repatriation flight arrived yesterday with over 300 passengers before the official opening of our international border next Monday, the 1st of August, with 0 MIQ. Paula with more on this story.
The passengers are quarantined at the usual MIQ facilities at Makeke site, Kupesi Hotel and Tanoa Hotel, with some in-home quarantine. The opening of our border comes after 2 years since the repatriation flight program started on the 13th of July 2020. The opening of our borders is in line with the government's open border policy framework, where the number of incoming flights to Tonga will be limited to 2 weekly from New Zealand and Fiji, and 1 from Australia from August 1st to August 28th. This is expected to increase to 3 weekly flights from New Zealand starting on the 29th of August until the 31st of October, where there will be 6 flights per week from New Zealand. Meanwhile, there will be a further review to the number of flights and cruise liners for September and October, and will be at the discretion of the National Emergency Management Committee, or NEMC. However, there are health conditions required before entering Tonga, including COVID-19 testing and vaccination proof. Meanwhile, the government's decision to reopen our international border lies in the fact that the number of COVID cases has decreased considerably to less than 10 COVID cases daily in the past few weeks. Paula for Radio and Television Tonga News.
That's our local news with Radio and Television Tonga News for the hour with Tonga Development Bank.
Tonga Development Bank does not charge you levy for using its currency exchange or DD services.
Sports is up next with Mark Ake, and it is kindly sponsored by Pacific Timber and Hardware.
To rugby union. 2 ex-students of Tonga College have returned to the country and are sharing their skills and knowledge with the youth today. These two ex-students are the Japanese internationals Yosaya Fifita and Paula Makisi. The two are currently on break at the moment and are back home to see their families while also giving back to the grassroots levels of footy, where they started before making a career in Japan. They attended Tonga College and were part of its rugby academy program, which allowed students to find rugby opportunities overseas. Yesterday, radio and television Tonga Sports were able to catch up with the two during one of their training sessions with rugby youth at the Fungamanamaui rugby field at Atele. Kintetsu Liners winger Josiah Fifita said that they are happy to share whatever they can with these young players, so when they grow up, they can replace them as they get older and take the same opportunities they were fortunate to receive through rugby. He added that he has noticed that rugby has improved in the kingdom, and there is hope that the current youth can grow up and play for the Kaletahi or Matema'a Tonga. He also encourages parents to push their children towards rugby as they can make a living out of it. Fifita spent his high school and university days in Japan before he played for the Sunwolves in Super Rugby and now plays for the Kintetsu Liners in the Japan League One competition. Meanwhile, Japanese flanker Paula Makisi said that there are plenty of opportunities in rugby, but it all depends on hard work and how one can handle obstacles. He says focus and belief will help one achieve his or her goals. Fifita and Makisi have also represented Japan in junior levels.
And that concludes tonight's English news package. But before we part, here's one final look at tonight's top stories. New Supreme Court of Tonga Judge Mrs. Petonia Dubo KC was sworn in as a new Supreme Court judge by the Honourable Prime Minister Hukamiliku this morning. Two police officers are suspended on Wednesday from police duty on serious breaches of discipline charges, and the 2022 Chiefs of Defence 24th Conference completed as a Chief of Defence Staff. Brigadier Lord Philakepa participated and represented Tonga. And that's it for tonight. Thank you for your company. I'm Alice Dubo. Have a blessed evening.